I never thought the happiest day of my son's life would end with police sirens and my heart breaking in two. It happened at his wedding. A beautiful ceremony, white roses, chandeliers glittering like a fairy tale. Everyone was smiling except my 8-year-old grandson, Mason. He looked uneasy all day, like a child carrying a secret too heavy for his little heart. During dinner, as laughter echoed around the hall, he tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, look under the table." Daddy said not to tell, but I'm scared. At first, I thought he was just being silly, but when I looked down, pause. Music intensifies. What I saw under that table changed everything. Before I tell you what was there, tell me where you're listening from, because this story, my story, might remind you that even love can hide the darkest secrets. My name is Caroline. I'm 62 years old, widowed for nearly 2 decades. I raised my only son, Ethan, with every ounce of love I had left after losing his father. He was a good boy, bright, ambitious, charming, but somewhere along the way, success became more important to him than sincerity. Still, I kept believing he'd find his way back to kindness. When Ethan met Michelle, I wanted to be happy for him. She was stunning, tall, graceful, and from a wealthy family that owned half the city. But the first time she shook my hand, I could feel it. Her politeness was wrapped in distance. Michelle didn't like that Ethan had a child from his first marriage. My sweet Mason. That little boy was my sunshine, always drawing me pictures, always asking me to tell stories about his grandpa. He still carried a photo of his mother, who passed away when he was only 4. Michelle pretended to be kind to him in public, but behind closed doors, I saw the truth. She never wanted Mason at family dinners. She said it was confusing for him to be around when they were building their new life. Still, Ethan swore she'd come around, that Michelle just needed time. I wanted to believe him, so I smiled and kept protecting Mason the way I always had. The day of the wedding was breathtaking. A luxury hotel ballroom decorated like a movie scene, crystal chandeliers, an ice sculpture shaped like a swan, violins playing softly. Everyone looked perfect, except me. I wore my best navy blue dress, but among those designer gowns and diamond necklaces, I felt invisible. The guests spoke about yachts and private schools while I just sat there, holding my purse, smiling when they glanced my way. Mason stayed close to me all evening. He wasn't allowed to sit at the main table. Michelle said, "The children's table is over there." But Mason refused to leave my side. He leaned into me and whispered, "Grandma, can I stay here?" "They don't want me near the front." My heart cracked a little. "Of course, sweetheart. You stay right here." While the guests clinked champagne glasses and cameras flashed, I kept looking at Ethan, my handsome son in his black tuxedo, his arm around Michelle. For a moment, I thought maybe this was his second chance. Maybe happiness was finally finding him again. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. Michelle's smile looked tight. Ethan's eyes wandered nervously across the room. Mason kept glancing toward the stage, and every time he did, his little face paled just a bit more. I tried to shake it off, telling myself, "It's just nerves, Carolyn." Weddings are stressful, but I had no idea that before the night was over, my family would fall apart in front of hundreds of people. All through the reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mason, usually so full of life, sat quietly beside me, his eyes darting around the room like a frightened bird. He kept glancing at his father, then down at the floor, as if he knew something he wasn't supposed to. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed distracted. He wasn't paying attention to his guests or his new bride. Every few minutes, he'd pull out his phone, type something quickly, then slip it back into his pocket. His eyes kept finding a bald man in a blue suit near the bar. They exchanged short, tense nods, like two people sharing a secret no one else should hear. I told myself I was overthinking, but my stomach refused to settle. At one point, Michelle snapped at a waiter for bringing the wrong dessert. Her voice carried across the hall, sharp and cold. "Do you people ever get anything right?" she said. Then she forced a smile when she realized guests were watching. The bridesmaids, seated not far from me, whispered and giggled. One of them said, "Michelle would die if Ethan's ex-wife showed up today." Another replied, "She probably checked the guest list 100 times just to be sure." That made my heart tighten. Why would anyone even mention Ethan's late wife at his wedding? Mason tugged my sleeve again. "Grandma," he whispered, "can I sit here with you the whole time?" "Of course, darling." "What's wrong?" I asked. He just shook his head. "I don't like it here." "Daddy keeps looking at that box." "What box?" I asked, leaning closer. He pointed toward a tall pile of wrapped wedding gifts near the stage. "That one," he said softly. "Daddy said not to touch it. He said it's important." I smiled faintly, trying to ease his worry. Maybe it's just a surprise for Michelle. But Mason didn't seem convinced. His small hands fidgeted in his lap. Then he said something that made my heart skip. "I'm scared to sit near Daddy's gift box." I frowned. "Why would you be scared, sweetheart?" He looked down and whispered, "Because he said it's our secret." "But I don't want secrets, Grandma." I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the lights dimmed and the music grew louder. The speeches were about to begin. I tried to calm Mason, keeping him close. He pressed his head into my arm and whispered again, trembling, "Grandma, there's something under the table." I froze. "What do you mean?" "Daddy told me to guard it. But Michelle said he'll be rich and we won't matter anymore." I didn't understand what he meant. I thought maybe it was a child's imagination, but the fear in his eyes wasn't imaginary. It was real. So I slowly reached down, lifted the edge of the tablecloth, and looked. My breath caught in my throat. Hidden beneath the long white tablecloth, behind Mason's small shoes, was a black duffel bag. It looked out of place. Too plain, too ordinary for a wedding like this. I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one saw me. Then I quietly unzipped a corner. Inside were several thick envelopes filled with cash and a folder labeled Prenuptial Agreement. Another envelope lay on top, sealed with neat handwriting across the front. "To Michelle. Only open if you leave me." I felt my heart pound in my ears. "What is this?" I whispered. Mason looked down, guilt clouding his little face. "Daddy said it's our escape money," he murmured. "He said we might need to run away one day. He told me not to tell anyone, not even you." I could barely speak. "Why would he say that, Mason?" He shrugged helplessly. "He said Michelle's family has lots of money and he just needs to be smart. Then we'll be okay forever." The words hit me like a storm. My son, the boy I raised, the man I believed in, was planning something deceitful. I looked across the hall, and there he was, smiling for a photo, champagne glass in hand, pretending to be the perfect groom. In that moment, I understood that both he and Michelle were hiding things from each other, and poor Mason was caught right in the middle of their greed and lies. I zipped the bag quietly and slid it back under the table. My hands were trembling. Mason looked at me, searching my face for safety. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "You did the right thing telling me." He nodded slowly, though I could see the confusion in his eyes. I sat there, pretending to listen to the laughter, the clinking glasses, the endless chatter about love and forever, while knowing that everything around me was about to collapse. I didn't know when or how, but I knew the truth. Whatever was hidden under that table wasn't just money. It was a secret powerful enough to destroy a family, and by the end of the night, it would. The speeches began. Michelle's mother stood up first, glowing with pride and a kind of smug satisfaction that made my stomach twist. She raised her glass and said loudly, "Finally, my daughter has someone who can give her the life she deserves." A few people clapped. Others laughed politely, but I saw Ethan's face harden. His smile vanished. Then, from across the room, that same bald man in the blue suit, the one Ethan had been whispering to all night, slipped a folded note into Ethan's hand. Ethan opened it quickly, his jaw tightening as he read. I caught a glimpse of it before he stuffed it into his pocket. 3 words were written in red ink. She found them. Run My Pulse started racing. Who found what? Ethan stood abruptly, pretending to fix his jacket. But before he could move, Michelle was already walking toward him, her heels echoing like thunder on the marble floor. She looked furious, her cheeks flushed, her hands trembling as she held his phone high in the air. "You think I wouldn't find out, Ethan?" she shouted. The room went silent. The band stopped playing. Every eye turned toward the bride. Michelle tapped the screen and a recording began to play through the speakers. It was Ethan's voice, calm, cruel, confident. He said, "She's a temporary upgrade. Once her family's money clears my debts, I'll file for divorce. Then Mason and I will start over. Free and rich." Gasps filled the hall. Some guests covered their mouths. Others started recording on their phones. Ethan tried to grab the phone, but Michelle shoved him away. "You used me," she screamed. "You lied to me just like you lied to everyone else." I wanted to disappear. My son, my own son, was being exposed as a con man on his wedding day. Michelle turned to her mother. "He planned to drain our accounts, Mom. He forged documents. The man you just toasted to was going to steal from us." Ethan's face turned pale. "That's not true," he yelled, but the bald man in the blue suit stepped forward and shouted back, "It is true." She found the messages. "Ethan, you're finished." Ethan looked around desperately, as if trying to find an exit or a way to salvage what little pride he had left. He spotted the duffel bag under our table and started walking toward me. Mason clung to my arm, trembling. "Grandma, what's happening?" I held him close. "It's okay, sweetheart. Stay with me." Ethan reached us, his face a mask of panic and rage. "Mom, give me the bag," he hissed. I froze. "Ethan, stop." "Don't do this. Just give it to me," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Before I could respond, Michelle's security guards moved in. The entire room was chaos. Guests shouting, cameras flashing, Michelle sobbing uncontrollably. And in that chaos, I realized my son wasn't the victim of a misunderstanding. He was the author of it. Ethan lunged for the duffel bag. Mason screamed. I instinctively stepped between them. "Ethan!" I shouted. "He's your son, not your shield." But Ethan wasn't listening. His voice cracked as he tried to grab the bag. "You don't understand, Mom. I have to get out of here before they—" He didn't finish his sentence. A guard reached for his arm, but Ethan shoved him back. Chairs toppled over. Someone called for security. Mason started crying. "Daddy, stop. Please stop." I spread my arms in front of him. "You're scaring your own child." For a split second, Ethan looked at Mason. The anger in his eyes faltered, replaced by something that almost looked like regret. But then, as the guards surrounded him, that softness vanished. "You'll regret this, Mom," he spat. "You've always chosen everyone else over me." He tried again to yank the bag from under the table, but this time one of the guards grabbed it first and opened it in front of Michelle and her family. The truth spilled out, literally. Envelopes of cash, the signed prenup, fake bank statements, letters from debt collectors. Michelle's face twisted in disgust. "You used me," she said, her voice breaking. "You used your own child." Ethan didn't answer. He just stood there, breathing heavily, cornered by the mess he'd made. The guards restrained him until the police arrived. He tried one last time to plead with me. "Mom, please, help me. They'll take me away," but I couldn't. Not anymore. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly. When the officers led him away, Mason buried his face against me and sobbed. I held him tightly, feeling his little heart beating fast against my chest. He whispered, "Grandma, Daddy's not coming back, is he?" I stroked his hair. "Not for a while, sweetheart." As the police car drove away, the flashing lights reflected in the wedding hall's crystal windows. The guests had gone silent. The night that began with champagne and music had ended in whispers and disbelief. I stood there with Mason in my arms, realizing something I never thought I'd have to face. My son wasn't just broken. He was dangerous. And from that moment on, I knew I had one duty left in this world: to protect the only innocent soul caught in the wreckage of his choices. The days after the wedding felt like a blur. Newspapers and local blogs were full of headlines about the scandalous wedding fraud. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, people pretending to care. But I ignored them all. I only cared about one thing: Mason. Ethan was arrested that same night. The police charged him with attempted fraud, assault, and violations of his custody agreement. He had borrowed money from people he shouldn't have, and the evidence found in that duffel bag was enough to prove everything. Michelle refused to bail him out. Her lawyers made sure of that. I could hardly blame her. When I took Mason home with me, he didn't speak much. He just held his little blanket and stared at the window. At night, I could hear him whimper softly in his sleep. Each time, I sat beside him until he drifted off again. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal untouched. He said quietly, "Grandma, do you think Daddy still loves me?" That question cut deeper than anything else ever could. I took his hand. "Sweetheart, your daddy is sick inside his heart right now. But none of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it." He nodded slowly, his eyes full of tears. A few days later, I received a call from Child Protective Services. They needed a stable guardian for Mason until the custody situation was resolved. There was no hesitation in my voice when I said, "Yes, I'll take him." The judge approved emergency custody within a week. When I brought Mason home for good, he looked around the living room, clutching his small backpack. "This feels safe," he whispered. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept peacefully. No nightmares, no crying. As I sat beside his bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, the boy I once held in my arms, who used to bring me wildflowers and say, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a big house." Now he was sitting in a jail cell. I had loved him so fiercely. I had believed in him even when he gave me every reason not to. But now, I finally understood something painful and clear. Some people you love can break themselves, and if you let them, they'll break you too. I still prayed for him every night, not for him to come back into our lives, but for him to finally see what he'd done and feel remorse. Whether that day would ever come, I didn't know. What I did know was this: Mason had a chance to grow up surrounded by truth, not lies, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure of it. 2 months passed before Ethan sent a letter. The handwriting was familiar but shaky. "Mom," it began, "I'm sorry. I lost everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but please tell Mason I love him. I'm getting help. I don't know if it's too late for me." I sat at the table holding that letter for a long time. My eyes burned with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. Some wounds need silence to heal. Life slowly started to find rhythm again. Mason began therapy. Michelle reached out one day, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. She said, "I'm sorry for how I treated you before." I didn't see who you truly were until all of this, I told her. We all see clearly once the storm passes. She thanked me for taking care of Mason. I could hear genuine regret in her voice. When December came, the house felt warm again. Mason helped me decorate our little Christmas tree. He hummed carols as he hung each ornament, carefully placing one star at the very top. On Christmas morning, he handed me a small folded paper. "I made you something," he said shyly. It was a drawing, crayon lines full of color and innocence. It showed a wedding hall, tables, lights, a little boy, and an older woman pulling him away from danger. Under one of the tables, he'd scribbled something small and faint, a black duffel bag half open. At the bottom, he had written in shaky letters, "The secret you saved me from." I covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. Mason smiled and said softly, "Grandma, you're the only one who kept me safe." I pulled him into my arms and held him tightly. That moment, I realized something I'd never said aloud. I hadn't just saved Mason from the chaos of that wedding. I'd saved him from the life Ethan almost trapped him in. As I looked at the lights twinkling on our little tree, I felt peace for the first time in a long while. Families break, families heal, but sometimes the real family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one who protects you when the world falls apart. Sometimes life doesn't break us to destroy us. It breaks us to show who's truly standing when everything falls. I may have lost my son that night, but I gained something even more precious, the chance to raise love again in the heart of my grandson. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories that speak to the soul, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that even in betrayal, love can still protect what's innocent. Until next time, this is Voice of Clara May reminding you, every story can change a heart, broken heart, shooting star.